When I first arrived at college, I was excited and nervous. Being an international student, I knew it would be an adjustment. I was ready for new experiences, but I wasn't prepared for my roommate. From the start, he was awkward. He showered once a week, which was gross. Worse, he often left his wet underwear in the shower corners. It just sat there, moldy and smelly. When he shaved his beard, he left hair all over the sink. Cleaning up after him became a regular chore for me. He rarely left our room. It felt suffocating. His presence made me uncomfortable, so I spent most of my time at the library or a cafe nearby. Anything to avoid the room. One night, I woke up to find him sitting in a chair, almost naked, watching me sleep. It was the creepiest thing I'd ever experienced. My heart raced, and I pretended to stay asleep, hoping he'd go away. He eventually did, but I couldn't sleep after that. He also had a disturbing habit of watching adult content without earphones in the bathroom at night. The noises were unmistakable and deeply unsettling. I dreaded nighttime. We had a big fight one night because he refused to turn off the lights. I had an exam the next morning and needed sleep. I threatened him to file a complaint against him to the dorm management office. The next day, after my exam, I went to the office to file the complaint. To my shock, he had already filed a complaint against me. No one believed my story. I feared losing my scholarship, so I decided to avoid him as much as possible until the end of the term. Then, suddenly, he stopped coming to the room. For a few days, I enjoyed the peace. His parents showed up soon after to collect his belongings. Nobody knew what happened to him. Rumors flew around the dorm. Some students said he had essayed another student, but nothing was certain. I never saw him again, and I finished the term in relative peace. The experience left me wary and a bit paranoid, but I was relieved it was over. This is the story of why I'd rather be homeless than live with a roommate ever again. I was in my early 20s, just dropped out of college, trying to overcome a terrible depressive phase. I was studying a major I hated and overworking to pay off my loans. I also had a terrible breakup, which made me desperate for a change. So, I moved to another city after finding a job. Because I was broke, I needed a roommate to share expenses. That's when I met Lisa through a roommate finding website. She seemed nice, had a steady job, and was easy to talk to. We signed the lease, and everything was fine for the first month. At first, I had a weird schedule because I was just starting out at work. I often worked late and left early, so I hardly saw her. But as I settled in and had a proper work schedule, I started to be more open with her. We began hanging out and having movie nights. One day, she confessed that she had feelings for me. I told her clearly that I'm not into girls and see her as a friend. That made her upset, and she stopped talking to me. I felt awkward and started to avoid her. After a while, she started talking to me again and tried to be intimate with me. I refused her advances again. This time, she went nuts. She started playing loud music at night to disturb me while I tried to sleep. She invited over some of her weird friends and did really disturbing things in the living room. She also stopped paying her share of the bills. She turned my life into a living hell. When I told the landlord to do something, he said it wasn't his problem as long as the rent was paid and no damage was caused to his property. He said it was my responsibility because I chose her to be my roommate. So I had to start looking for a new apartment all over again. Somehow, she knew that and went crazy. One day, I came home late from work. The house was dark and very quiet, which was unusual because Lisa was always home at that time. Suddenly, I heard noises coming from my room. I knew it was her and was furious because I told her many times to never go to my room, especially after everything she had done. My anger turned into horror after I opened the door. She was sitting on my bed, her eyes bloodshot and clearly drunk. She told me that I should never leave her, and we were born to be together. If we couldn't be together, she had to put an end to everything. I was very scared because she was really angry and hysterical. I froze when I saw a knife beside her. My instinct kicked in, and I ran and hid in the bathroom. I called the cops while she kept banging on the door, trying to get in. The police came and arrested her. The disturbing thing is what they found in her room: handcuffs, ropes, and a gun. I was very traumatized and went back to my parents' house. I started therapy because I kept having nightmares. As for her, she somehow managed to get herself out, but she never contacted me again because I got a restraining order. She feared for her freedom. I never felt safe, always thinking she would come to take revenge until I heard recently that she passed away because of kidney cancer. When I first moved to the city for college, I found an amazing apartment close to campus. It was a 3-bedroom place, and the rent was affordable. I thought I hit the jackpot. The ad said there was a couple living there, and they wanted to rent an extra room. It sounded perfect. I met them, and they looked like they were in their mid-30s. The girlfriend did most of the talking, and the boyfriend was a big guy, but very quiet. Overall, they seemed really nice. The first few weeks were normal because they were out of the city. However, when they came back, I started to notice strange things. First, there was the noise coming from their bedroom. They were really wild, and often did it more than once a day when I was there. I was very embarrassed to meet one of them after that. Also, the way they dressed in the house made me uncomfortable. The girlfriend used to wear a thin nightgown showing her body, and the boyfriend often wore just underwear and walked around the house like it was normal. Until now, they didn't talk to me often, just small talk mostly with the girl because the guy didn't talk much. But things got disturbing when they started inviting people over, mostly guys, and throwing parties. I'll let you imagine what they did after the party. I started to feel uncomfortable and didn't feel safe in my own place. I couldn't invite my friends over because I feared they might see something inappropriate or even hear something while I was on the phone. What pushed me to my limit was one night when they woke me up at around 4 a.m. to ask if I wanted to join the fun they were having. I felt so awkward, even though they apologized the next day, pretending they were drunk. One night, they had a huge fight, and someone at the party was badly hurt. The cops were called and arrested everyone. I took that opportunity to collect my stuff and move to my brother's place. I remember the day I found the ad for the empty room online. It seemed perfect. The house was in a calm neighborhood, and the rent was affordable. The ad said it belonged to an old woman who lived alone and wanted to rent out a room. When I met her, she seemed strict, but it didn't bother me at the time. She told me she didn't like parties, stayovers, or noise in general. The room was furnished and clean. I signed the lease and moved in. For the first few months, everything was fine. I barely spoke with the old woman. She usually sat in the living room knitting and watching TV. She kept to herself, and I appreciated the peace and quiet. But everything changed when her son moved in. She never mentioned she had a son. One day, he just appeared. She told me he was in the military, but he didn't look like it. He was huge, unfit, covered in inappropriate tattoos, and had long, greasy hair. He sent chills down my spine the first time I saw him. At night, I often heard him arguing with his mother. He would drink in the living room until morning. I complained to her about it, but she said it was only a temporary situation. But his actions got worse. He started asking me private questions, like if I was single. I told his mother, and they got into a huge fight. He threatened her with a gun. I was terrified. I called the police, but when they arrived, the woman told them I was lying and that nothing had happened. I felt so helpless. I called my parents, and they told me to leave the house immediately. That night, I stayed at a friend's place. The next day, I came back with my father to pick up my things. A neighbor told us that her son wasn't in the military, but had been in prison for armed robbery. I felt a mix of relief and horror as I packed up my belongings. I was glad to be leaving, but I couldn't shake the feeling of how close I had been to real danger.